Good evening to all you sane people who live on planet Earth and love the red pill life. I'm Paul Elam with a Voice for Men with James Huff, and this is AVFM News and Activism. How the hell are you, James?
I'm feeling great. Ready for this Roosh in review.
Oh, absolutely. Me too. Let me do something here. Sorry to have such an awkward ending. I am recording part of this in a different way, and I thought it might be a good idea if I actually turned on my recorder and did a soundboard clap. So how's that for distraction? Okay, folks, last week we had Roosh on, and we talked for a good long while about PUA, about MHRAs, and the similarities and the many differences between the two. And we're going to do a little bit of a review of that. But first, we have news stories. And in covering these, we want to give you some red pill's perspective on what's happening in current events. And my goodness, isn't there a lot happening, James?
Oh man, I'll tell you, it's going to be a good week this week as far as news stories are concerned. Coming out of the community of the wrongly accused. Thank you to Pierce Harlan.
Good man, Pierce.
The hateful Roanoke college students who tried to keep a student out of college after he was found not guilty of rape. That's a catcher, isn't it?
Okay, we're back on the air, folks.
We never let up. We never let up. We bring you the best. Last March, a 19-year-old Roanoke college freshman male from Zimbabwe, Africa, was charged with the rape and aggravated assault of a female student in connection with an incident that occurred in a college residence hall. It was a classic he said, she said case. The accuser, still not named by the news media, even though the young man she accused has been named, claimed she brought the young man to her second-floor room, they got on her bed, and began to talk in the dark. What happened after that is disputed. The accused claimed that while they were having consensual sex, the accuser protested, so he stopped and left. The young man was suspended by the college, and even though no one except the accuser and the accused know for certain what happened, the district attorney decided to roll the dice with the life of a teenager, and the matter proceeded to trial last November. It took the jury just 25 minutes to deliberate and find the young man not guilty of either charge. According to the news report of the trial, cross-examination brought forward apparent contradictions between the statements the woman gave to the police and her courtroom testimony about that night. Wow, they can't even... Wow. Whew. Then the accused attempted to re-enroll at Roanoke College. Cue the lynch mob. On December 4th, 2015, Roanoke students circulated an online petition to keep the accused student out. The petition stated, ready for this?
I'm not sure, but please proceed.
In March of 2015, a Roanoke College student was raped by another student. After charges were brought up, he was suspended from the school. Now that the criminal trial is over, he is trying to re-enroll as a student.
And they don't mention that he was found not guilty.
Multiple individuals have stepped forward and said that his behavior towards the victim is not incongruent to his personality and past actions. Others have stated that similar actions have been imposed on them at the hands of this student. If he is allowed back, no female student will be able to feel safe. A majority of the student body will be put at risk. We ask you to sign the petition, stand by your fellow students, and stand by the campus culture of respect and safety. If you are worried about signing and remaining anonymous, we urge you to sign with your student ID number, which will not give your name to anyone other than the Dean of Students. We plan on submitting this petition to the Dean formally on December 8th and appreciate all the support we can get before it is submitted, as well as continued support after the submission. Okay, I've got to throw something out there real quick. 2 statements that I'm seeing right here have little to no bearing on the actual article or its contents. But if he is allowed back, no female student will be able to feel safe. Very next sentence, a majority of the student body will be put at risk. You see,
I'm not often left speechless, but I tell you, I am really, really, really thinking that what that college needs is about a dozen bulldozers. And just raise the motherfucker. What?
I mean, this is the quality of the students that they have on this college. What the hell are they teaching the students?
Well, what kind of idiot parents are raising kids like this too? I really
Parents
would like
aren't
to know
raising
that.
their kids, man. Parents are not raising their kids anymore.
No, they're not. Because
I mean,
something.
you know, and you can look at a lot of these parents, and they're just fine people doing their everyday thing. But then you look at their kids, and you realize that these kids are not the product of their parents' upbringing. These kids are the product of government schooling.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there, James, because it isn't. I mean, we know that the universities enable this stuff, but we also know that this is the culture in education, going all the way down to probably elementary school. This sort of thinking. It's for the first time. I saw something recently, a Prager Institute video on free speech, where they did surveys, and for the first time in, I believe, recorded American history, a majority of students, college students, answered a survey question saying they don't believe, essentially don't believe in free speech. They believe that speech should be controlled. That isn't bad parenting. That's a lack of parenting. And you're right. They're not parenting them. And it's amazing to me because we have so many of what we call helicopter pilot parents in this culture that hover over their kids to make sure that the teachers give them the best grades possible and to make sure they get into the best schools, but do not take one moment to try to teach them how to think critically or to teach them about their civil liberties.
Well, all they do is care about the grades. They don't care about what the grades are based upon. That's the key element. I mean, you know, if they were really helicopter parents, you know what they would be doing? They'd be going over every year's syllabus. That's what they would be doing. If they were truly helicopter parents, they would be sitting down with their kids at the beginning of the school year and saying, what's your syllabus look like? What is it that these kids are going to actually be filling their heads with? Not, hey, Johnny, did you do your homework? Hey, Johnny, did you do your homework? Hey, Johnny, did you do your homework? Because asking that question means exactly jack and shit for finding out the content of exactly what that homework is.
It is just, we're failing. We're failing, James. I mean, it's just all falling down. Kids can't think anymore. Parents don't bother to make sure that they can think. And we end up with ideologues lending the way because they're the only one that seem to have an opinion on anything. And their opinion, as we know in the world of education, is that men are guilty by default. I also take note that this young man was of African descent. I don't think that's accidental in his treatment either. And I know some may disagree. I don't care. This is bigotry. If they're going to do it to men, they'll do it to any other identified group. He happens to be black. That's all the better for the bigots of this world. Just bulldoze the school down into rubble. Destroy it. and build it from the ground up, and hopefully,
Yeah, because the proof of the schools, proof of the school's viability is through its students, and if their students are signing this, 291 students signed the petition. Okay. And the still unnamed accuser shared the link on her own Facebook wall and wrote, "Thank you so much to the person who made this petition. Please help prevent this from happening to another student," after he's found not guilty, mind you. And after it was plainly brought up that there was conflict between her courtroom testimony and what she gave the police, she has the fucking audacity to say, "Please help prevent this from happening to another student." You know what? If it was a petition signing to get him back in, I could certainly see somebody saying, "Please prevent this from happening to another student."
oh, sure, absolutely. We should prevent false allegations, and we should try to prevent rapes too. But preventing imaginary rapes with real men and real men's lives being destroyed in the process, get the fuck out of here. This is an abomination, and it's been going on too long. But what are you going to say? People tolerate this stuff. That's the way of the world these days. Parents are only too happy to send their sons right into the meat grinder of the modern American and Canadian universities, also in the UK, throughout the Western world, and now in the East. Parents are only too happy to send their sons into those schools saying, "Get good grades. Whatever you do, don't think for yourself. Play sports, do whatever." But a word about these kinds of difficulties that are now faced by our young men, absolutely nary a word from parents.
And obviously, just from the petition itself, a majority of the students must be female.
Oh, yeah. Well, we know that's the case across all universities now, except for all male schools.
Right. I mean, if he is allowed back, no female student will be able to feel safe. A majority of the student body will be put at risk. That right there is telling you right there that there's some issues of disparity in the educational system. Well, what's going on here?
I will throw into the mix here for any students that stumble on this that are having these kinds of problems where you've been exonerated, where there's no evidence against you. Go visit Boys and Men in Education.com, Jonathan Taylor's website. There is a lot of schools getting their asses sued off right now, and the number of lawsuits is growing exponentially. If you're being treated this way by your school, sue them. Make them pay the price. Take it out on their wallet.
Well, fortunately, this story does have a happy ending.
Oh, that's great. So how did it end up?
Well, later in December, Roanoke College held a disciplinary hearing, and the young man was found not responsible for sexual misconduct. Oh, I'm sorry. Not such a happy ending after all, because it only took them 25 minutes of a jury of his peers to find him not guilty, but Roanoke College just had to have a disciplinary hearing about it later.
Well, yeah, after he's persecuted, and as you know, once you're accused, you're pretty much toast. And then, but anyway, gosh, I feel like I need a shower after talking about that story. Why don't we roll on here? More to talk about. How about doing something good for white guys, James? What do you think about that?
Oh, that's great. That's great, folks. There is something beautiful going on. If you go to privilegegrant.com, that's all one word, privilegegrant.com, Milo Yiannopoulos has now set up a privilege grant, a bursary available exclusively to white men in support of their post-secondary education. Now, he tells us what he does, why he does it, some of the campus facts.
And this is dead serious.
This is dead serious. Absolutely. This is not just well, I have no doubt he's a provocateur. I have no doubt in my mind he's going to put forth the money. He's going to go through with it. but he's doing it as a pure slap in the face to all the social justice warriors out there.
Oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that.
It's just
Well, but if you go look at privilegegrant.com and you look at the research that is there supporting why they're doing this, it's more than a slap in the face to social justice warriors. I mean, I'm sure, knowing Milo, that is a great benefit that he is. I certainly don't imagine for a moment he's not aware of the impact that this has on SJWs, feminists, and their ilk. But the fact of the matter is that young men in college are in trouble. They are falling by the wayside. There are lots of grants, or at least sufficient amount, for minorities, meaning young Black men, Hispanic men, to find grants. But when it comes to young white men, if they don't actually have privilege, which only a very few have, they're not going to find much help. And Milo is addressing a very real problem with this. I can tell you one thing: we will be talking among AVFM senior management and figuring out a way, with whatever paltry amount we're able to. We want to support this scholarship fund, and we're going to do that. But I want to say kudos very seriously to Milo for bringing attention to this problem in this way. I know that the feminist media is already losing their shit out there over this.
And kudos to Margaret McClellan.
Yes.
She is the director.
And she's a woman, I read part of her bio. She's a woman who's been through some hell at a intestinal resectioning and lots of physical problems, and yet has dedicated her life to paying attention to problems that are neglected, and is supporting this effort by Milo. Really good effort on their part, and it's also very Milo. Got to say it. Somebody's going to complain. I don't care. You just got to love this fact, Jay. You just have to. This is the most fagalicious fag in fag human history. I love this guy. He's amazing, and I don't mean that in a homosexual way, but this guy is really, really forcing the issue fearlessly about men and boys in this culture. He's not covering it up with polite talk. He's not playing the mainstream political game. He's not engaging feminists as though that they are sincere, rational thinking human beings. He's kicking ass and taking names. And I just really love this guy. I do think he's an amazing activist.
Yes, he is. But he's definitely an attention hog as well.
Oh well, I mean, shit.
I love his.
Yeah, I'm going to sit here and bitch about that. No, let him hog all the attention in the world, because the attention that he's getting is ultimately on a different dialogue that needs to be had, and I think one eventually that will come out into a discussion that is emerging now about the alt-right, but I won't go too far into that. Maybe we'll have time for it before this program's over. But folks, it is the privilegegrant.com. You can also find them at Privilege Grant on Twitter and follow there. And there are taking donations, and this is very serious. This is for the scholarship efforts for young white men who are being neglected at every turn in the education system, and who are in fact labeled as privileged and entitled when they are in most cases not that way. And kudos to Milo for doing something about it.
All right. Next up, Mail Online. Taxi driver suspended and banned from taking children to school after he was reported for kissing and hugging his own daughters. Oh my God. Imagine that.
My God.
Holy crap. Taxi driver was banned from taking children to school after he was reported for kissing and hugging his two young daughters. Tony Kemp, 60, from Wow.
Kirkby Moorside.
Okay. Was suspended from the school for 6 days by North Yorkshire County Council after they said an allegation had been made against him. The council refused to tell him why he was suspended, but a colleague told him he had been seen kissing and cuddling 2 girls outside of school, which he then realized were his daughters, who are 9 and 11. He says he cannot understand why he was not told what the allegation was and why he was not interviewed as a matter of urgency, which would have given him the opportunity to explain what had really happened. The past
Explanations? We don't need no stinking explanations.
No, we're just going to run you up the flagpole. The past 6 days have been the worst of my life since my father died 35 years ago, said Mr. Kemp, who runs Crystal Cars in Pickering. I'm personally devastated at the allegation aimed against me. I've also lost hundreds of pounds worth of business, but even worse than that is that my good reputation, which I have built up over the past 12 years, has been shattered. I'm worried about reprisals from people who think I go around kissing school children. Mr. Kemp's ordeal, which he described as a living nightmare, began last week when he was telephoned by a council official and told he was being suspended from the school run with immediate effect. He was told that an allegation had been made against him, but he could be given no more details. An acquaintance in the taxi trade then told him that it was well known in the Pickering and Malton areas of North Yorkshire that a driver had been suspended after someone had reported seeing him kissing and cuddling 2 girls outside Pickering Junior School. Wow. So he had to find out from an acquaintance who told him that it was well known in the local areas.
Good grief.
Yeah. So they couldn't tell him, but hey, somebody was opening up their mouth, right?
And what does it say that anybody, what kind of human being, if you see a grown man in a public open space hugging a child and giving the child a kiss, immediately assumes it's perversion? What kind of ignorant, twisted fuck reacts that way?
Jermaine Greer.
What group of ignorant, twisted fucks allows that kind of narrative to just explode and suspend somebody with no explanation without asking a single question?
Jermaine Greer.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. But I mean,
she blatantly said that kissing a daughter goodnight, sending her off that was a sexualizing act.
Well, apparently there's a lot of Jermaine Greer readers out there, but James, I'm afraid we're going to have to load about 6 of those dozers onto a ship.
Oh, God.
And take it across the pond and start tearing some shit down there. Oh, my God. The world is insane. It's absolutely insane. And we're joking around, man, but can you imagine what that's like? Driving around he's got a public reputation as a businessman, and knowing that the people that have come to know him over the years are now looking at him as though he's a sexual pervert with children. It's got to be a nightmare to be going through that.
As a taxi driver.
How
the hell can you make a living as a taxi driver with that kind of reputation?
Oh, you got to worry now about some lunatic getting in the back of your car and clubbing you over the head because they think you got it coming.
Right.
It isn't just a lost business. This guy's out there and vulnerable right now. I mean, gosh, you'd think there'd be some way to sue this place.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, he was reinstated after he was formally interviewed and the charge was dropped. And the council spokesman said, "We have followed the child protection procedures. This matter has now been investigated and found to be false." Yeah, this is their procedures now.
Oh, Lord. Lord, Lord, Lord. Just some days. Man, one of these days we'll be able to come on this program, James, and talk about evidence of real sanity. And we already have with Milo's deal, but gosh, I mean, that put me on a little bit of a high. And now I feel like this dragged me right under the waterline again.
Sure. And look, folks, this is the way a lot of these agencies work. They will pile up allegation after allegation. They won't tell you a damn thing about what you're being charged for or what you're being charged with, because this isn't a criminal proceeding yet. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
So they don't have to. They are not obligated to tell you a damn thing according to the law. They can keep their mouths shut, sit on it as long as they want, watch your livelihood and reputation be destroyed and your life put in danger, and then come out after the fact and go, oh, our bad. There's no accountability, none, with these agencies. This is true in the UK. This is true in the US. I have heard more horror stories out of various child protective services here in the US than I care to count. I used to see it all the time when I was in the military. All the time. People were getting involved with CPS left and right. And you watch these soldiers come in, hangdog, not knowing what the hell is really going on. And they're being called into the commander's office, getting their asses chewed out. For what? So that way, 6 to 8 weeks down the road, when these guys have been jumping through their own assholes to not only keep the civilian side of things under control, but also the military side of things under control, all of a sudden, oh, nope, nothing's there. Sorry.
And that's how it works. I mean, that's how I know that one of the early cases that I heard of any of this when I really started getting involved in the movement was with Caleb Warner. Same story. He was exonerated by police. In fact, this is the University of North Dakota. They issued a warrant for his arrest, for the arrest of the girl that made the accusation for filing a false police report. That's how convinced they were that this guy was innocent, and the school still would not admit him back in. They were determined to make the stigma attached to him, as if that needed any help in this culture. And we see that same kind of mentality throughout children's protective services. And I mean, if there was ever a misnomer, they destroy families. CPS destroys families and chews them up. They're like an extension of family courts that go in and finish the job. Family court halfway kills the family with the divorce and the way it's handled. And then CPS finishes off whatever remains that might be healthy. It's a sad and beautiful world.
And you know, these little state and local governmental departments all get this federal funding, and they get this federal funding based off how much they spend. If they don't spend all the budget, well, guess what? They don't get as much the next year, which means you don't get the cost of living increases that the local government might want to give you or the state government might want to give you. And you don't get the nice new building or maybe the perk with the car that you get to drive. And these people are actively looking for anything that they can try to pad the books with in order to justify their existence.
Well, yeah, if you want your little racket to survive, you're going to have to find bad guys because that's where the money is, bad men. And that's where they get the dough rolling in all these things. And it's so effective, mind you, that you end up with a loving father embracing his child before sending them off into school and his life is destroyed for it. And the insane, degenerate motherfuckers that did it to him talk to you about policy and following procedures as though they're totally comfortable with this sort of travesty.
Right. Hey, these are the same motherfuckers who would have turned up the voltage all the way in the original Milgram experiments. I don't know if you're familiar with the Milgram experiments.
Yes, where they, under authority, we find that people are willing, that a really alarming percentage of people are willing to actually execute somebody if they're given instruction by authority.
Yes. Yep.
And I'm familiar with that study. I've seen a couple of documentaries on it. It's one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen in my life.
Especially when that authority says, oh, well, I'll take accountability. Because for some reason, those words are supposed to, automatically absolve us of some individual moral responsibility we have to our fellow man. That is what is really disturbing, is that we give up our own accountability to these authority figures. And we give up our own accountability to policy and law. That is disturbing. And that is exactly what we see here.
That's why I don't much like a law and order mentality, James, because it leads to mindlessness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Shall we move on and try
Yes.
to find, can we try to find something redeeming here? Man, we're just like these stories. It's like, thank God for Milo. Maybe there's some good one in this. I haven't read all of it, but this is a story out of the College Fix titled Digital Rights Activists Blast Feminists for Demanding That Colleges Punish Online Speech. Well, I like the headline. But let's see what happens. Maybe this will be good. The growing divide between uneasy allies on the left has been partly driven by disagreement over how colleges should respond to sexual assault allegations, with a rush to judgment against male students or a deliberative process that affords due process rights. Is that like a real discussion? A related element of that divide is concern for First Amendment rights. The digital rights activists at the Electronic Frontier Foundation have come out swinging against dozens of feminists who want colleges to investigate and punish students for their boorish speech on anonymous platforms such as Yik Yak or ban them entirely. In a letter to the Department of Education, which is investigating a college precisely for its response to Yik Yak posts that offended feminist students, EFS says the Feminist Majority Foundation and its allies want to take away constitutional rights. And here's a quote from a letter from them, part of their complaint. In addition to violating the U.S. Constitution, such rules would undermine the efforts of many people who rely on anonymous speech for any number of important purposes, including groups seeking to foster gender and racial equality on campuses across the country. Over the past few years, we have seen how policies that impede online anonymity, such as Facebook's real names policy, present barriers to speech for marginalized communities and others who fear retaliation for their political or social commentary. Colleges must protect students against unlawful harassment and true threats, but are also bound by Supreme Court precedent to protect insulting and even outrageous speech, EFF says. Categorical and prophylactic rules restraining all anonymous speech on the grounds that a subset of such future speech may be harassment or threats depending on a particular context would be unconstitutional. It would disempower the very groups and policies which are designed to protect by limiting their ability to speak anonymously. Anonymous speech has particular value on college campuses when students seek to advance controversial or unpopular views or otherwise avoid being the targets of threats or harassment. The feminist demands put them in league with law enforcement organizations that want to compile digital dossiers on anonymous Black Lives Matter activists for, in scare quotes here, protected political activity, the letter says. EFF calls on universities to use their own speech to counter harassment on Yik Yak. And another quote from them, as the department has previously recognized in the context of sexual harassment, while the First Amendment may prohibit a school from restricting the right of students to express opinions about one sex that may be considered derogatory, the school can take steps to denounce those opinions and ensure that competing views are heard. This is at least somewhat uplifting until you start considering the fact of how bizarre it is that we are even having this discussion about college campuses, that we're actually having a debate on whether free speech is a good thing or a bad thing. And I suppose anything in a true environment of free speech, even a debate about free speech, is a healthy thing. But this is no longer a debate. This is a program of cry bullying and intimidation, both from academicians and students who are activists. And this is precisely the thing that people like myself and James and Miles Yiannopoulos and others face on the larger internet regularly, where it concerns the expression of speech, that everything you say is regarded as hate when it is not. And even if it was, folks, even if I believed that women were terrible human beings, that they were worthless, and that I hated all women, I should have the right to express that. It might make me a moron if I believe that way, and in my belief system, it would make me a moron. But there's no law against being a moron. And we're dealing with people now who want to persecute and prosecute and censor any ideas in dissent with their own beliefs. It is a growing problem, and we've got a young population of people now that have really never lived in a society where free speech was the norm. They never went to a college with a classic liberal education where you debated all kinds of things and no ideas were considered off limits. So this is pretty forbidding, James, pretty forbidding. But I'm glad that we're also seeing the countercultural movement. I can't imagine that I ever thought that, who would have thought that more conservative and I would say rational thinkers would ever become counterculture. Because the loons are the establishment.
Well, the loons took way too much acid back in the 60s, man.
Yeah, I mean, apparently it got passed on genetically to their kids, or they're redistributing it. Because you're getting this stuff from people all the way from, Jermaine Greer's generation down to, fresh 18-year-olds hitting the college campus as freshmen and immediately enrolling in gender studies and starting to screech about how, all the white males that aren't even at the school anymore have too much privilege.
Yeah, somehow they're oppressed by the guy who can't go to college because, he can't get a grant or a loan because he's white. All of a sudden, they're oppressed by that guy who's working the drive-thru. That's what I'm hearing. That is exactly what I'm hearing. This guy who's working 10 to 12 hours a day in some drive-thru who can't get into college because he can't get the money together for grants and loans is being called an oppressor by people who are getting all those grants and loans and are getting the type of education that should ensure their success in the future if they didn't waste it on frivolous degrees.
And I don't know how we stop this, James, in an environment, because I mean, dig this. It is. How do we end up in a culture? Here we've got camps of men who think that all like Muslim men are rapists. And we have other camps of men that think all women are liars. And they're on the same side.
Supposedly, yeah.
How the hell did that happen?
I don't know. I often wonder if we don't just have too much free time on our hands.
I guess so.
I mean, I'm thinking to myself, okay, any day now, the ship is going to come into port, and they're going to say that taxes are due.
Well, you're right about one thing. Anybody that can decide that they're going to be offended and that they need to make some sort of social movement out of somebody saying something silly on Yik Yak, you got way too much time on your hands. You got as much time on your hands as Spike Lee does. I just love multimillionaires that boycott events full of other multimillionaires because they don't feel like their particular group of multimillionaires was represented well enough. Spike Lee,
go figure.
Get a fucking life. I mean, how can you be that rich and not have a fucking life?
That's the thing.
Beyond me entirely.
No, these look, I don't think it's going to be an easy thing to end. What we do is we try to polarize the battlefield. I know I speak of it, I sort of speak of these things in terms that I understand. So take it how you will. Our job is to polarize the battlefield. Don't get me wrong. We have begun making strides in helping others. But I think for the most part, those strides are going to be taken up by those who have the means to do so and do so freely. They're going to be able to pool in the type of funds necessary to disperse when they need to. What we do is inform.
The informable.
Inform the informable. Yeah. But look, it's not like it's a totally hopeless cause. Look at the dialogue that's being presented. Tell me, 6 years ago, was this dialogue being presented on such a large scale?
Absolutely not. And you're completely correct. I'm just being a little bit pissy right now. I think I'm just tired of this shit. That's all.
Yeah, you don't understand why it isn't over yet. And in some ways, I've got the feeling it's not going to be over until something is made to happen. And what I mean by that is you're driving out all these stupid individuals so ignorant on our own history and our own values and what made us powerful, that they are going to squander every bit of that. And they're going to squander it all on an ideology that goes straight into the fucking hole. And they're going to drag everybody else down with them. And hopefully there'll be enough of us left to put a great big fucking sign up that says, "Don't do this, motherfuckers!" And maybe there will be some lesson that comes out of it now. We could look at the vast expanse of human history and go, really? That in and of itself is kind of a optimistic thing you're talking about there, James. But,
well, yeah, it is. But God, it's better than the shit running through my mind right now. Because I just can't get images of bulldozers out of my mind.
Well, these things happen. These things have to happen, and they've got to happen in their own way. And where we see there was nothing being talked about except in private message boards and small forums and small blogs, which had a few interesting minds come in from time to time. All of a sudden, we're seeing much more national discussion. And we're not talking about national discussion from the types of people who are putting out a contrary message just to put out a contrary message or just to sell a book. We're talking about a national discussion through politicians, people who actually have something to lose. We're talking about national discussion on the floors of business. And this is something we've never seen in the last 40 years.
Well, I agree. And I'm just listening to you talk, James, it even questions why I'm feeling so pessimistic about all this. Like I said, I do think I'm just a little bit fed up, especially, and I'll say it, I don't care, be mad if you want to, I am fed up with the political left or what passes for being left these days. I'm fed up with what passes for being right, too. You all suck, all of you.
Look,
You identify
the age of reason ended. I think truly the age of reason ended some time ago.
Yeah, with Barry Goldwater. And in most cases, people listening to this won't know who the fuck Barry Goldwater is. All I can say is Wiki is your friend, and there used to be some reason in politics. There is no more. But I do think that we're seeing with this is not counted as an endorsement, but I think that the phenomenal success so far of Donald Trump, whether you love this guy, hate this guy, think he'd be a shit president or a great president or whatever, I think that Donald Trump right now is living proof that there is a growing body of people in this culture that are sick of PC nonsense and that are really gravitating toward this ballsy individual that, okay, so he's going to step on his dick every once in a while. People don't care. He says stuff that would ruin any other politician, and his popularity grows. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a symptom of the times that we're in. People are tired of this stuff. And I can't say I blame them.
No, I can't say I blame them either. But I'm sure you've heard of the women's petition against coffee in 1674, right?
I don't think I have, James. Why don't you enlighten me?
Okay. Folks,
all the times I've been to Starbucks, I didn't know that.
When we talk about things like this, folks, you have got to keep some historical perspective. You really do, because what comes around again. It really does. All right. And this women's petition against coffee was sent up to the King of England at that time. Okay. The women's petition against coffee, representing to public consideration the grand inconvenience accruing to their sex from the evasive use of that drying, enfeebling liquor.
Liquor?
Yes, that's what they referred to it as at that time. I do understand their language is, a little bit older.
So before oh my gosh, before we had the women's temperance movement, we had women trying to ban coffee.
Absolutely. And look, you've got all these feminists who are saying, oh my God, women were so oppressed. Women were so oppressed. Yes, women were so oppressed that they came up with a petition to ban coffee and sent it to the king. Imagine this in 1674. All right. So
what was their problem with coffee? What did it boil down to?
You ready for this? Listen to this, because this the occasion of which insufferable disaster, after a furious inquiry and discussion of the point by the learned of the faculty, we can attribute to nothing more than the excessive use of that newfangled, abominable, heathenish liquor called coffee, such rifling nature of her choicest treasures and drying up of the radical moisture, has so eunuched our husbands and cripple our more gallants, that they become as impotent as age and as unfruitful as those deserts whence that unhappy berry is said to be brought. So the whole damn petition essentially boils down to our men are spending too much time at the coffee houses and not enough time fucking us.
And we're going to petition the king.
Or they have no interest in doing so. And there were some arguments that came out against this petition as well. Yeah, the petition made its rounds in the newspapers of the time and the printing houses. And the coffee houses were so full of people at that time that it was unreal.
Well, of course they were. If you live with a bitch like that, wouldn't you find somewhere to go?
You hit the nail on the head. Here we go. I'm going to read this verbatim from my source here. Men tried to fight the accusation of impotence by saying coffee rather assists us by drying up those crude flatulent humors which otherwise would make us only a flash in the pan, without doing that thundering execution which our expectations exact. Essentially saying, hey, it makes us last longer in the sack, so we can fuck you the way you want rather than ejaculating too quickly. Okay? So they used that, and then they also said, home wasn't the most fun place to be. You may well permit us to talk abroad, for at home we have scarce time to utter a word for the insufferable din of your active tongues. The protesting women.
I was right.
The protesting women didn't accomplish much. It reached the point where newspapers and the mail were delivered to coffee houses rather than homes. Yeah, it actually did get to that point.
Oh my God, that's too funny. Thanks for sharing that. That's a great story. Oh my God. Before men escaped into bars, they escaped into coffee houses.
Yes, they did. And once again, we see the same things, folks. This is all I'm pointing out through this tale that I tell here, is that history does repeat itself. Every single time you come up with a space and you're not paying attention to those individuals who want you to pay attention to them, they come by and they want to wreck it. It happens all the time. We saw it with the lodge houses in the 50s, coffee houses, an attempt so made on the coffee houses in 1674. We saw it with the temperance movement back in the early 1900s.
And now we're seeing it with the NFL. And we saw it with the mythopoetic movement.
Yes, we did.
I never forget talking to a feminist during those days when Robert Blythe, Sam Keene, Iron John, all these guys were really big, and large gatherings of men were happening in a lot of places. Feminists were losing their fucking minds.
Of course.
That men were gathering without their influence. They were just like the housewives who probably got pissed off because you got to figure back then, how bad did your husband have to want to be away? If somebody gave him a choice of go home and have sex with your wife or sit here at this uncomfortable table and sip on hot water steeped in bitter black beans. And he says, give me a couple of cups of that stuff, man. That sounds pretty good.
Well, the camaraderie, I will have to point that out. There was a certain certain camaraderie to it. Look, I've been into my fair share of VFWs and cigar shops, and I do remember a time back in the early to mid 90s when you could walk in any hobby shop and it was packed full of guys looking to play D&D, looking for the next dungeon master to run their game. Yeah, I'm a geek like that. And there was always this sense of camaraderie there. You walk into the room and everybody yells, "Norm!" I don't know how many of you get that. That's an old Cheers reference. It's a sitcom that came on sometime.
I'm old enough to get it. Matter of fact, I think I was pretty old when I got it.
But that is a necessary thing for a lot of men. And you take men out of that environment and you put them into their individualized man cave, and what do? They don't have a way to reach out like what you and I are doing right now, Paul. They begin to suffer. They begin to suffer greatly. Even if they can leave that cave and walk out on the street at any time, they don't have a space, they don't have a place, and they don't have people of similar mind filling it, with which they can share common interests. And that is a deadly thing to us.
That reminds me, James, and I'm going to go back quite a ways here, of a time you talked about men in smoke-filled rooms, and that is painted as an image of chauvinism, of macho, of course, misogyny and exclusion of women. And that last charge is true. But I remember times when I could go into a nice bar that had a humidor and big oversized leather sofas and big chairs with deep, rich carpets, and sit there with a drink and a good cigar and maybe just strike up a casual conversation with a guy I had no clue who he was, and talk about cigars or talk about the drinks or about what was going on in politics. And it's one of the most comfortable environments in the world because there is no women there.
There's no expectation to be anything other than what you are. You can release the full capacity of your intellect and sometimes your emotional content.
Yep, you sure can.
In that space and not be judged for it. And you're able to exercise your own influence. You're able to exercise your mind by bouncing ideas off of people who have similar interests. And even if they're in total disagreement with you, you're able to speak in rational tones, those ideas that you have. And it comes out as a therapeutic philosophy. I guess that would be the best way to describe it. And you don't see that anymore.
Nope. They have done a good job at taking it away, and men have done a great job of allowing it to happen.
They sure have.
I personally allow them. I feel like the men are more culpable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And right now, there's a number of feminists who are up in arms. There's a recent article over at the Mary Sue screaming about the NCFM and Harry Crouch bringing up lawsuits against some of these women-only gatherings, using the same laws.
Yes, he's using the UNRRA Act.
Exactly.
And for those of you that don't know the UNRRA Act, that is a California law passed and pushed for by feminists that prevented discrimination in many public gatherings, saying that you can't just have a group of men and not allow women in.
Right.
And they are using that law as a way to include men and to make an example of maybe you want to allow people to have their own space. Do I think people should be allowed to gather and exclude others? You're damn right I do.
Yeah, that's freedom of association.
Sure. It's a basic fundamental human right, in my opinion, that people should be able to gather. Some people's level of exclusion, I would say good. I wouldn't be a part, like, for instance, I would not be a part of a group of white men that didn't allow any minority men into that group. And we each get to pick where our line is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the beauty of the association. And the thing is, if somebody wants to associate based on race, they're welcome to do that. And who am I to judge it? But it is really hysterical watching these feminists, the level of hypocrisy in them, and them trying so hard to say, but we didn't mean it when it happened against us.
It wasn't meant to be that way. It was meant to protect women.
Yes, because equality.
Yeah, because of equality, right. Folks, this is what you get when you follow this authority blindly. You end up with stupid laws, and those stupid laws make people do stupid things. It happens all the friggin' time. And then you have to turn around and you have to show by example how those laws are messed up. And the very same laws that were set forth to protect groups that never needed it in the first place because of the specific language that was used in them are now being used against the
elitists.
Against the elites. Exactly. And they don't like that, not one bit. And they're going to scream and rail and cry and do everything under the sun. What I'm waiting for, Paul, is I'm waiting for the women-only laws. That's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for the moment that it happens. Because for the most part, in criminal and civil law, you don't see anything but gender-neutral terms. And its application, on the other hand, is very culture-specific, which is why we can point to various judges and call them out on their rulings. But the way that these people have been speaking, especially about matters of free speech, women's rights and protections that they deserve, things of that nature, I am really waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that is when sexed language is placed directly into law. I'm waiting for that. And folks, we will be there to give it to you. AVFM News and Activism will be keeping an eye out for things like this, and you better damn well believe that the first hint we get of something like this, all you listeners will be the first to know.
And this is something we've already talked about in regards to other countries like South Korea that has women-only parking spaces, and India that has women-only train cars. These laws have already started in India and the EU. So it is probably only a matter of time before James's prediction is going to be fulfilled, and we're going to sure enough be sitting here talking about women-only space where men will get arrested to go in the United States of America. Won't that be an interesting time?
Won't that be an interesting thing? And yet there will be no facilities for the other side. That's the real thing here, folks, is if you're going to do it both ways.
Yeah. Well, there's always going to be those of us that are going to be an increasingly louder voice to make sure that happens. I'm really grateful for the work that Harry Crouch and NCFM does. They're the oldest men's rights organization in North America, dating back to 1977 when they were founded. And they do a great job of pulling together talent, especially, legal talent, things like that. They're the ones now. Mark Angelucci of NCFM is suing the federal government over the unconstitutionality of the selective service law. And they're out there kicking butt all the time, and they're increasingly finding success with these legal actions. That's not something that AVFM does, but I'm glad that somebody else does it. I tell you what, James, we don't have a lot of time left. But one of the things that we said in the announcement, sort of the main thing, is that we were going to talk about Roosh.
Yes.
Now that we can talk behind his back, we'll go ahead and do that. But no, listen, let me start this out and say that I really enjoyed the talk with Roosh. I struggle sometimes to know what to believe in him. Because basically what we got last week was a guy that was talking about this need for men to have sex and to perhaps approach it in a way that would lend me to think it was very gynocentric and self-demeaning. And at the same time, being now at a place, and he sounded very sincere to me, now being in a place in life where that had worn on him, that he had sowed his wild oats, and that he was, for lack of a better word, ready to settle down. And I found that part of what he said very genuine. And I actually, I think, gained a little bit from talking to him and listening to what he had to say. So I don't look back on this with any sense of snottiness or feeling better than Roosh at all. I hope the guy's stuff works out for him, but I am very curious about because you allowed Roosh and I just to talk last week, and I could imagine there had to be a lot of thoughts going through your head.
Oh man, were there?
So what was that like?
Well, let me start out by saying that when he kept putting forward the same argument, got to have it, got to have it, got to have it, and
I assume you're referring to pussy.
Yes, with what seemed to me a total disregard for the points you were making concerning the safety of men in today's society and how we should be responsibly teaching men those signs that they are about to stick their dick in crazy. Okay? I didn't feel good about it. I did not feel good about the fact that he was just brushing that to the side repeatedly. I had a sense of some biological determinism that would affect the mental faculty of the individual so strongly that they just have to have it or they'll die. That's the sense of what I got. I'm sure in fact, I know I'm exaggerating, but you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
That disturbed me as well. Once again, folks, this moves away from being an agent of free will and moves us further away from the age of reason, in my opinion. I think there is no manifest destiny written inside of our genetic code to a point. We're still shaped generally how we are, but I don't believe that this desire to breed between the ages of 16 and 27 or whatever those magical numbers happen to be is so great that without, you're just going to be a withering fruit on the vine of life. I think there are a great many other things to worry about. I think the lack of speech about self-ownership and self-value, or holding to the values of the self, on his part was disturbing. We've spoken about this on a couple of occasions, where a man who holds himself to a standard, to certain values that are beyond the proclivities of a sexual nature, are often the ones who begin to attract the opposite sex very quickly, because they meet with greater amounts of success, long-term success, in those areas that change and influence the world around them, that grant them power and dominion, so to speak. And that often attracts members of the opposite sex. Now, I could go out any night of the week, and were I not in a long-term relationship, I could go peacocking. That is, dress how I know the women like me to dress, and smell like I know the women like me to smell, and talk how I know the women like me to talk. And, you know, the acquisition of one-night stands would be constant. It's not that hard. It's really not hard if you're near any kind of military base, but it's not that hard. And yet, what fulfills me? Is it that Friday night? That Friday night going out, do I spend my whole week going, okay, I gotta get Friday night, those 3 hours that I'm going out and I'm gonna go find me some. Is this all my life is? Because if so, then I have certainly lost focus of a key concept called delayed gratification, folks. And I think the show before last week's show, I spoke on the matter of delayed gratification and what it is. Why do we need it? We live in an age now where all these young men and women go, I want it now. And for the most part, they get it now because they can. Folks, we've got it in abundance. It's so easy. You want that coffee? Guess what? You don't have to walk 5 miles down to the coffee house like you had to back in the late 1600s. Now you just hop in your car and go. Oh my God, wait a minute. Everybody can have their own espresso machine. It's as easy as walking into your kitchen. You could have your own groceries delivered. Being agoraphobic. Go ahead. You have your own groceries delivered. I mean, this is the type of society we live in now. And we are not pressing forward with the types of long-term goals that the human mind, who is no longer having to push resources to mere survival towards, should be pushing towards. Instead, we're filling our time with, let's go get the next pussy. Or we're filling our week with thoughts of, let's go get the next pussy. This job that I'm holding, this run-down, measly, dead-end job, oh, well, the pussy is the balm, folks. The pussy is the balm on a burn that never ends. And that burn is the waste of your life spent in pursuit of long-term goals that will provide you with the type of gratification in the future that pales in comparison to all those one-night stands.
Well, and there are, admittedly, I think, going to be some men who lean toward, and I think they, by circumstance, usually happen to be quite narcissistic men who really do get stuck in the notches on the belt and who don't reach past that. But I don't really view that as an accomplishment. I view it as a sort of a tragedy in the loss of potential we forget that many great inventors were lifelong bachelors that weren't getting laid all the time. And I'm sure that women were available to them. These were brilliant, powerful men, but they just chose to pursue other things. We have historical records of even monasteries full of incredible artists and artisans and craftsmen who lived the life of monks. And I'm not recommending that to anybody. I don't think I could have done that at any point in my life.
Not at all. But there's a balance there. There is a balance that you can reach in your life, and for those who can do so, then go for it. And look,
at least those monks are proof that if you don't get laid, it doesn't mean that your life is meaningless.
Exactly.
And that, I think, is the tragedy that so many men believe in, is that they tie their self-worth into it. Mm-hmm. And if they don't get that pat on the head from a woman and the open legs and open arms, they somehow take that on and make it a part of their defective self. And that's not the case.
Yeah. They don't focus on what the real problem is. They only focus on, well, like I said, I mean, they just put balm on a never-ending burn. That's all it is. No more than skin deep. And I think we do lose a lot. And look, we can look at the Don Juans of the world, and we can look at the we look at main fictional characters that run around with their capes and their little troubadour type hats and everything, and we have our modern day equivalents as well. Look at the main character in 50 Shades of Grey, for instance. Yeah, he's tall, dark, handsome, rich, and a womanizer, and boy, can he get it. Folks, these are exceptions. These are also rare exceptions, because I can almost promise you that 99% of these guys sitting on these boards as CEOs or part of a council running all these companies, these motherfuckers are putting in hours. And when they're not putting in hours in the boardroom, they're putting in hours on the golf course talking about what they're going to do in the fucking boardroom.
Or it can get worse than that. While we got a little time here, I want to share one thing with you guys. I was reading comments on, I even forget which video it was, and I came on a comment by Karen Strawn, Girl Writes What, who is, I think she is besides being brilliant and highly articulate, she is also perceived somewhat as in erotic imagery and a sort of highly sexual creature. And she talked about the number of sexual partners she had. And my reaction was, God, is that all?
Right.
And I'm not saying this to brag, but if what she quoted was correct, I've had a lot more sexual partners than she's had in my life. But I also know that during the times when sexual partners were abundant, that's everything I was investing my energy in. It was everything that I was doing, and I was not getting anywhere else. I certainly wasn't being an MRA. I wasn't pursuing my writing. I wasn't pursuing any of my own interest. I was just constantly dealing with a woman. And then usually one after another.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not personally, even in my younger years, I did not ultimately find that kind of life very fulfilling at all.
Most of them don't, which is why around the age of 27 or so, they all of a sudden decide to settle. Look, this is not some biological switch that's being thrown here. This is the back of your mind saying, okay, more of the same. We know where these roads lead. What else is out there for me?
And the answer is a lot.
A whole lot. And, I hope Roosh discovers his whole lot. I really do.
I do too.
But I would also,
I came out of that liking the guy.
but I would also counsel all of those who look through his body of work to consider that a lot could come a lot sooner than 27 years of age, and that it is never too young to begin planning for 100.
I don't know if it's the world we have now. I don't know if I want to make it.
Might not last 100.
Might not want to.
No,
that
but
may not seem too appealing.
Look, I think that for those who do begin to turn their mental faculties toward that long distanced goal, when they find their second star to the right, instead of just looking at the earth right under their feet and tripping over whatever may come, I think that if the world is filled with more of those types of people, then they may very well pull the rest of us with them. And we have so much wasted potential right now. We have lots of colleges that need to be bulldozed. We have lots of government programs that...
Can I correct you, James? That would be pretty much all of them.
we have lots of government institutions that need the same thing. And folks, I'm not advocating actually going in and bulldozing places.
I am.
we need what we need to do is we need to cultivate a society that contains values that are not antithetical to basic human rights, free speech, freedom of association, things of that nature, which is exactly what we're doing right now. We're looking at the fall of the age of reason, and either it cannot come too soon for the spring back that will occur, which will happen after a short dark period, or it's going to be a long fucking hard slog to pull ourselves back from where we are right now. I see the long hard slog, but I think people like Paul and I are laying the groundwork for future generations to build off of.
I agree with you, and I think James has just spoken like a true statesman. I, on the other hand, will just say buy stock in Komatsu. Because I want to take this bitch down. Just start over. But oh my goodness. Well, this has been a very interesting talk. Started out on a bummer for me with dealing with I feel like after all these years of doing this, James, that as soon as we start digging into the crazy, I just want to go enough already. Give me some sanity.
Right.
But
right.
We got that out of it, I think, in the discussion and in the knowledge that, and that's just something I will say. I'll brag a little bit, but I'm bragging on behalf of a large group of people. Thanks to the technology of the internet and the will of a comparatively very small group of people, stretching across groups like the Honey Badgers and AVFM and other individuals that are out there now talking and speaking truth to power. the cultural narrative is changing. We have altered the world with the internet and with these issues. And ultimately, as pessimistic as I can be sometimes when I see men acting like lemons and I see 18, 19-year-old children of privilege act like life has put upon them because they didn't like the sushi at their college cafeteria and come up with terms like cultural appropriation.
God.
Then it is disheartening. And at the same time, while we're at one of the craziest points in history in terms of the lunatics running the asylum, the dissidents are starting to find their voice, their ground to stand on, and their spine. And that really is a good thing to see. So if I haven't told you before, James, I'm proud to know you. And I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. And look forward to doing a lot more with you down the road.
The feeling's mutual.
And with that, I guess we could just wrap it up. I do want to announce a little something here, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try to get out 2 videos tomorrow. One of them is going to be part 3 and the final part in How to Get Laid, which the script is written for. Just need to shoot it. And the other is those of you who listen to this tomorrow, who really are close followers of the men's rights movement, will likely know that the program of the episode of The Doctors, which is a program a very popular program emanating out of Los Angeles, that Janet Bloomfield taped segment for that show. It was scheduled to air tomorrow, and they have pulled it. And I will be making a video about that. It's kind of like revisiting 2020 again. It didn't turn out the way they wanted it to turn out, so they're pulling the episode.
Of course.
But going to have a lot to say about that, because this is actually, when you hear all the facts about this tomorrow, hopefully, or at very latest the next day, you're going to hear a story that's a hell of a lot more interesting even than me going up and being face to face with Elizabeth Vargas, who tried very hard and failed to put any kind of chink in my armor. And then shortly after our interview, for some reason, she ended up in rehab. And that's a pretty good story. But this one is even better. So I'm going to be bringing that to a video talk, hopefully tomorrow, or like I said, the next day at the very latest. But I'm going to try to get both of these out tomorrow.
Excellent. Well, folks, in that case, we will go ahead and wrap it up. I just want to remind everybody to take the red pill.